Hey, welcome to your first WSQ of this semester. As you can see, our chapter starts off with ratios and proportions. This really goes in depth into basically similar polygons and similar triangles, which we'll get to later. Remember, this assignment is worth 10 points, so at the end of the video I'll give you some instructions of what I want you to do. But we'll have these videos every Monday and Wednesday, okay, starting tonight, which is obviously our first one. So let's go ahead and look at a ratio. So a ratio, just jumping right into it, is a comparison of two quantities by division. So it's a comparison by division. So in other words, we're just setting up some fractions as a ratio. So we're comparing any two things. And I'll start with a geometric example here in just a minute. On a side note, this video is for not only advanced geometry, but for regular tonight as well. They're both the same video. Obviously, eventually we'll have different ones, and I'll be sure to tell you which ones are which later on. Okay, so you can see from this example that the length of a rectangle is 8 inches and its width is 5. What is the ratio of length to width? So if we were going to compare the length and the width, we could set it up like this. Okay, again, it's a comparison as a fraction. So the length we know is 8 inches. The width is 5. That's it. That's the ratio of length to width, is 8 to 5 or 8/5. Now as a ratio, another way we can write it is using a colon, so it looks like 10 o'clock, 8 o'clock looks like a clock, but it's just 8 to 5, and that's how we read it, is 8 to 5. Okay, and we will read all of these ratios the same. 8 to 5, 8 to 5, 8 to 5. Either way you write these, it doesn't matter. We'll mostly use fractions because of cross multiplication, which we'll do in a minute, but really it doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and look at what that means. So what we're going to do next is solve what's called a proportion. Okay, and I'll go ahead and write that at the top up here. Okay, and we solve proportions using what's called our cross product property. So if we set up one ratio as A over B, we set that up equal to C over D, we can solve for any unknown variables by cross multiplying. So in other words, A times D is equal to B times C. So we're just multiplying diagonally. Okay, so let's go ahead and try an example. Okay, so with this example, we can see we just want to solve for the value of x using our cross product property. Okay, we will go ahead and multiply. So 9 times x we'll just leave as 9x. 16 and 27, we'll multiply that out here, but just to show you, again, we're just multiplying diagonally, 16 and 27. Okay, so 9x stays the same. Let's go and multiply 16 times 27, it's 432. And then obviously our last step, go ahead and divide by 9. So x has a value of 48. Okay. Now really what that means is that the fractions 9 over 16 and 27 over 48 are the same. That's really what the cross product property shows. Okay, those two fractions, those two ratios are equal. Okay, so you can see with this example it's slightly different. Now we don't have our proportions set up for us, so we'll have to set one up, and it's coming out of a word problem. So let's go ahead and read it, and I'll show you how we can set this up, and we'll go from there. So Mayor Hernandez conducted a random survey of 200 voters and found that 135 approve of the job that she is doing. If there are 48,000 voters in Mayor Hernandez's town, we want to predict the total number of voters who approve the job she is doing. So what I'm looking for, again, we can start at the end, is we want to know number of voters who approve. That's our answer. That's what we're looking for at the end, is approve. Okay. Now we're also going to look for anything we can compare. This is all about ratios and proportions. So we said earlier, the ratio is when we compare two different quantities. So we can see in the beginning, we compare 200 voters, 135. So those two things basically are showing those that approve to a total. So the number that approved to a total. So I'm going to go ahead and put some numbers in here. We know that 135 in this little random sampling approve out of 200 total. Now we're going to use that to predict how many we think would actually approve out of 48,000 total. So if we look at this number here, again, that's 48,000 voters. It's important that we put that on the bottom because that's a total number. That's not how many approve. Notice everything on the top up here goes with how many approve. I'm going to leave that spot blank. That's what we're solving for, is going to be X. So now you can see we can use our cross products property to cross multiply and divide. So we'll go ahead and do that. So 200x equals 135 times 48,000, which will be definitely a bigger number, but we'll work with that. So 200x equals, okay, 135 times 48,000 is 6,480,000. Go ahead and divide both sides by 200. And our value of X is equal to 32,400. And again, what we wanted to look at is that 32,400 approve the job that the mayor is doing. It's always a good idea to check to make sure that makes sense. 32,000 out of 400 approve, when in 135 out of 200. Yeah, that ratio sounds about right. Okay, it seems proportional to what we're doing. And again, with this, it's just a prediction. So who knows, that might number be way off a little bit, but it'll give us a good idea. Okay, so what I want you to do now is to go ahead and try an example. So I want you to do this problem on your own. You can go ahead and press pause now, and the answer will be revealed shortly. But go ahead and try this one in your notes. Okay, so hopefully you saw from doing that. Again, we want to go ahead and cross multiply still. So the result of the cross products property is 8y is equal to 3 times 24. Okay, which is equal to 8y is equal to 72. And again, after we divide by 8, should have found that y be equal to 9. Okay, so give yourself a pat on the back or a good thumbs up if you got that correct. And let's go ahead and try another example. So similar to the last one, I want you to try this one out on your own. Again, we'll do one more, and then I have one more thing for you after this. I'll read it with you first, and then you can go ahead and pause it and see if you can figure this one out on your own. So Brian is measuring plants in a field for a science project. Of the first 25 plants he measures, 15 of them are smaller than a foot in height. If there are 4,000 plants in the field, predict the total number of plants smaller than a foot in height. So go ahead and press pause now. See if you can set up a ratio and a proportion and solve for the value of X, which again would be the total number of plants smaller than a foot in height. Okay, let's go ahead and check your work. And again, we want to start off by looking at what we're comparing. Again, we're comparing plants he's measuring and how many of them are smaller than a foot in height. So the two things, again, we'll look at are how many are smaller than a foot in height versus a total number he's comparing as well. So after we set up our ratios, we know that he measures 25 total. Again, you don't want to go through this field having to measure all 4,000 plants. We can just kind of take a random sampling. He measures 25. He noticed that 15 out of those were smaller than a foot in height. We want to know out of total 4,000 plants in that field, how many would be smaller than a foot in height. So there's your correct proportion set up. Hopefully you at least got that far. Okay, and the rest is just multiplication and division. So 25x equals, we'll go and multiply 15 and 4,000, which is 60,000. Have to divide both sides by 25. Okay, x will have a value of 2,400. So out of 4,000 total, he'd expect 2,400 to be less than a foot in height. Okay, the last thing we're going to do today is I wanted to show you, if you do see an example like this, it's a little bit different, but the process is still the same. So you're still going to use the cross product property. So it doesn't matter which one you start with. You could start with 8 times 5 or you could do 4 times this whole quantity. And really, if you see that 4, we're going to multiply it by this entire quantity, whatever's up there. So I want you to write it out as 4 times 2x plus 3. We still set that up equal to 8 times 5. Okay, so what we want to do, hopefully you'll notice, is we want to distribute now. So 4 times 2 is 8x plus 12 equals 40. And we can go ahead and subtract from there and solve. So subtract 12, 8x equals 28. We're going to get a fraction on this one, so after we divide, should have x is equal to about 3.5. Okay. So that's it for tonight. Again, please log into Schoology, complete your discussion post. That's how you're going to get your points for this. It's one thing to just watch the video, but please make sure you get your points. Your post should be 2 to 3 sentences for the summary, and 1 question as well. So the 1 question is not included in the 2 to 3 sentences. So total, you're looking at about 3 sentences to 4 sentences, if that's including the question. Okay, so have a good night. If you have questions, email me, get in contact with me, and let's start the year off right and get your 10 points for tonight. I'll see you tomorrow.